Most people hear the word debt, and they think of stress. They think of being trapped. They think of bills, collectors, and sleepless nights. But the rich, the truly wealthy, often hear the word debt, and they think of leverage. They think of multiplication. They think of building something that outlives them. And if you don't understand this, you can work hard for the rest of your life and still feel like you're running in place. So today, we're going to talk about how the rich use debt to build wealth. Not in a reckless way, not in a prideful way, but in a disciplined, wisdom-based way. And if you stay with me until the end, you'll understand why debt is not the enemy. Misused debt is, and used correctly, debt becomes a tool that can build houses, businesses, and legacy. Now, before we begin, if you value calm, faith-based wisdom that actually helps you grow in the real world, take 1 second and like this video. It helps the message reach people who are tired of noise and ready for truth. Let me start with a simple statement that might surprise you. Poor people use debt to consume. Rich people use debt to produce. That one difference explains almost everything. Because debt is not just a number. Debt is a direction. It either pulls money out of your future, or it pushes value into your future. Most people borrow money to look rich. The wealthy borrow money to become wealthy. Let's make it plain. The average person goes into debt for things that lose value. A car, a phone, a vacation, furniture, clothes. Things that feel good for a moment, then disappear. But the wealthy, when they borrow for assets. Things that put money back in their pocket. A property that pays rent. A business that generates cash. Equipment that increases production. A skill that increases earning power. That's the first hidden key. Debt is not dangerous because it exists. Debt is dangerous because of what you attach it to. If you attach debt to a liability, it becomes a chain. If you attach debt to an asset, it becomes a ladder. And wisdom is knowing the difference. There is an ancient principle that says a borrower becomes a servant to the lender. And that's true. But what most people miss is this. The wealthy don't borrow to become servants. They borrow to become stewards. They borrow with a plan. They borrow with structure. They borrow with discipline. Because they understand something most people never learn. Money respects order, and chaos attracts poverty. Let me tell you a quick story. 2 men want to buy a house. The first man is emotional. He sees a beautiful home. He imagines his life there. He thinks, I deserve this. So he signs the papers. No savings, no plan, no margin. And for the next 30 years, the house owns him. He works harder, but he feels poorer. Because every month, his income is already spent. The second man also wants a house. But he's thinking differently. He asks a better question. He asks, will this house help me build wealth, or will it drain me? So he buys a property that has an extra unit. Or he buys something slightly below his limit. Or he buys in an area where demand is rising. And instead of the house taking from him, the house starts paying him. Same debt, different wisdom. This is what the rich understand. Debt is not about what you want. Debt is about what the debt can do. And this is where many people get offended. Because it's not fun. It's not flashy. But it's the truth. The wealthy do not make decisions based on feelings. They make decisions based on fruit. What will this produce? What will this multiply? What will this cost me long term? Now here's the second secret. The rich use debt to buy time. And this is where it gets deep. Because time is the real currency. You can lose money and recover, but you cannot lose time and get it back. So the wealthy think in decades, not weekends. They don't say, "Can I afford the payment?" They ask, "Can this debt create cash flow that frees me?" Because when you use debt to buy an asset, and that asset produces income, you are literally buying back your time. You're building a system that works while you sleep, and there is nothing more powerful than that. But there's a warning here. Debt only works when you have discipline. Debt is like fire. In the hands of a wise person, fire cooks food and warms a home. In the hands of a careless person, fire burns everything down. This is why most people should not copy what the rich do, until they copy how the rich think. Because the wealthy don't just use debt, they manage risk. They protect themselves. They move slowly. They do the boring math. They read contracts. They get counsel. They build reserves. They keep margin. And that right there is one of the biggest differences. The average person lives on the edge. The wealthy build a buffer. They don't just have faith, they have wisdom. And real faith is not blind. Real faith is built on understanding. Now let's talk about the third truth. The rich use debt with a clear exit plan. Most people borrow money and hope things work out. The wealthy borrow money and know how it will be repaid. They don't say, "I'll figure it out." They say, "Here is the plan." They know the numbers. They know the timeline. They know what happens if income drops. They know what happens if the market shifts. They know what happens if rates rise. They plan for storms before storms come, because they understand something spiritual. A wise builder does not start building without counting the cost. And that principle applies to everything: business, real estate, investing, even your personal finances. So if you're listening to me right now, ask yourself, do you borrow with a plan? Or do you borrow with a wish? Because a wish is not a strategy, and the future is not kind to people who guess. Now here's another secret the wealthy understand. The rich use other people's money, but they protect their own. Let me say that again. They use other people's money, but they protect their own. Most people do the opposite. They risk their savings. They risk their emergency fund. They drain their accounts. Then they borrow for lifestyle. The wealthy borrow for growth, and they keep their cash for safety, opportunity, and speed. Because cash is not just money. Cash is power. Cash is peace. Cash is options. And options are what separate the wealthy from the stressed. This is why you'll see wealthy people with loans, even when they could pay cash. Not because they're broke, but because they understand leverage. They understand that if they can borrow at a certain cost and invest in something that produces more than that cost, they keep the difference, quietly, consistently, over time. And that difference becomes wealth. Now I want to pause here and speak directly to you, because some of you have been taught your whole life that debt is always evil. And I understand why. Because debt has destroyed many families. Debt has caused divorce. Debt has caused depression. Debt has caused people to feel like failures. But listen carefully. Debt is not a demon. Debt is a tool, and tools are not good or bad. They are wise or unwise, depending on the hands holding them. So don't let fear control your financial future. Let wisdom guide it. And if this message is already helping you see money differently, I want you to like the video and subscribe to King's Wisdom and Wealth. This channel exists to spread wisdom, not noise, to build people, not hype them. And if you want timeless truth that strengthens your mind and your future, you belong here. Now let's move to something most people never hear. The rich use debt to build credibility. And this is one of the most misunderstood parts of wealth. Banks and lenders do not lend based on your emotions. They lend based on your track record. So the wealthy build a history. They borrow small. They repay faithfully. They increase their limits. They strengthen their profile. They build trust with institutions, not because they worship money, but because they understand the system, and they understand that systems reward consistency. This is why a person can make good money and still struggle to get funding, because income is not the only thing that matters. Character matters, consistency matters, stewardship matters. And in the financial world, stewardship is proven by how you handle what you already have. So if you want to use debt wisely, start by mastering small responsibilities. Pay bills on time. Stop living above your means. Build savings. Get your spending under control. Because if you cannot manage a little, you will not manage a lot. And the truth is, many people don't need more money. They need more discipline. Now let's get practical. If you want to start using debt like the wealthy, here are 3 simple filters you can apply. Before you borrow $1, ask, will this create income? If it doesn't, it's probably consumption. Second, ask, does this debt bring me closer to freedom or closer to pressure? Because if it increases stress and reduces your margin, it's not wise. And third, ask, what is the worst-case scenario and can I survive it? Because the wealthy don't ignore worst-case scenarios. They prepare for them. That's why they last. That's why they stay standing. That's why they don't panic when markets shift. They already counted the cost. Now I want to bring this home with one final thought. The biggest reason debt works for the rich is because they don't use debt to escape reality. They use debt to build reality. They don't borrow to impress people. They borrow to build systems. They don't borrow to feel successful. They borrow because they are thinking about legacy. And legacy requires structure. It requires patience. It requires long-term vision. There is a kind of wealth that is loud, and there is a kind of wealth that is holy, quiet, steady, built with wisdom, built with restraint and discipline. And you don't need to be born rich to live that way. You just need to learn how to think differently. You need to stop asking, what can I buy? And start asking, what can I build? Because the moment you become a builder, your whole financial life changes. So here's what I want you to remember. Debt is a servant. It must never become your master. Use it to produce, not to consume. Use it with discipline, not emotion. Use it with a plan, not a wish. And above all, think long-term. Because wealth is not built in a rush. It is built in seasons, with consistency, with humility, with quiet obedience to wisdom. If this video gave you clarity, do 3 things right now. Like it, share it with someone who needs this truth, and subscribe to King's Wisdom and Wealth. Because the world has enough financial noise, but not enough wisdom. And always remember this, the rich don't use debt to look wealthy. They use debt to build something that lasts.